couple of things that I learned, also having that, industry insight from working in an agency, a couple of things to keep in mind. There's no rest for the weary. So to speak, there's no set it and forget it. And I think that's kind of where a lot of companies will maybe fall flat. Maybe they don't have a person dedicated to managing the relationship like it needs to be. I personally think that a lot of times when you think agency, you think of total outsource. And so, in order to really get the value, you need to be checking in on a very constant basis. I have a monthly call with our team. I'm constantly working with our revenue operations team, our sales team, our marketing team, our other marketing, we have different departments, so to speak, within the marketing team, even though we're pretty lean. And so just constantly saying, okay, what's the quality of these leads? How far do they get in the sales cycle? Where are they falling off the sales cycle? Are they getting enough education? Things like that. And so again, that's my number one, because it is the most important. You cannot just say, okay, we hired an agency, they're taking care of everything. So that's number one. Number two, and this may be hard, we had to figure out a lot of workarounds, but two-way data sharing is absolutely imperative. You have to treat them like they are a part of your team. You can't just say, hey, you out in left field, we need to hit this metric and we need to bring in this much revenue. You need to tell them what is successful on your end. So we do that a couple of ways. We have figured out, it might be skittish to hand over the keys, so to speak. But if they don't know what is working for your team and getting leads to qualify, turn into opportunities, get all the way to your sales team, have success with your sales team, then they're not going to be able to attract the right people. So one of my ethos that we live and die by in marketing on the Review Trackers team is, well, one is work smarter, not harder. And then the second is that, you need to go to the source of the success and then work backwards. So going to where the customer is, dissecting the customer, understanding what made them win. Again, I think that we all know that as the ICP, but really it's like, I think there's a bit of a difference in marketing between the ideal ICP and the actual ICP. So make sure you're going all the way to that end of the road. And so working backwards and then sharing that data with the agency is going to really help the success with all of the efforts that you put together. We actually share on a quarterly basis a lead report and then a closed won opportunity report. So they're able to actually take all that information and they're able to connect the dots and then say, okay, we need to do more of this, less of this. The other thing that we do, and that, it's a capability that I believe everybody has, so make sure that you're utilizing this if you're doing any PPC, is to set up Google with your Salesforce data or whatever you use for your CRM and your, sales operations, because that can actually help you learn and optimize, but to a certain extent. I think we all know that technology is great to a certain extent, until you've accidentally trained your Instagram algorithm to only show you pictures of dogs and people blowing up balloon animals, personal experience. And you're like, no, I need to calibrate that. So I think, technology optimization is great, but within reason, just like agency optimization is great, but within reason. You need to constantly be checking in. Lastly, over communication and for optimization, I cannot understate that enough. The first thing, that I did was to set very, very, very clear goals with my agency, and they have been wonderful to work with. I did not take no for an answer. They were like, okay, listen, we can't guarantee this. I'm like, okay, but I need this to come out of our relationship. So how can we get to a place where we're both on the same page, we're both understanding those things, and constantly working to that? Like I said, you need to treat the agency like a member of your team. You can't just set them off and let them run. You need to tell them what your team is doing. We're constantly optimizing and creating new landing pages and new content. And it took me a while to remember, oh yeah, this might be something good to share with the agency. And in fact, something that really came out of it that was really neat was we'd sent them all of the typical landing page URLs, like to our demo, to our video, all of that, to use in advertising. But then as a team, we actually repurposed our ABM marketing that's very, very, very industry specific to a broader inbound sense. And so we were able to create industry specific landing pages with stats and customer success stories that talk to the specific industry. And, there might be a little bit of a verdict out on does industrialization matter, but I think in marketing it does, because the way you talk to your prospects, it can really, create a lot of engagement. So we repurposed all of that, and I was like, oh yeah, by the way, we're doing this initiative. Do you want to utilize this? And of course they did. And that is now our number one best performing campaign that we have. It's the industry specific one. So just a quick takeaway there is like, you need to constantly be evaluating what your team is doing. Is there any metric of success you can learn from that you can translate to the agency and constantly be communicating with them? Major takeaway in all of this, your agency is meant to augment your team, not replace it. I personally think that is the biggest misnomer where agency relationships fall flat and are doomed potentially, but they don't have to be, because again, I think, talk to your team, talk to the internal structure of your team. What were the expectations of the agency? A lot of times I think people will outsource because they don't have that internal bandwidth. And that's exactly what happened to us. But I knew that we couldn't afford to just let them be off on their own. We had to let them know what we expected. We needed to constantly measure success. And I'm not going to lie, it is a lot of hand-holding, but it not in that connotation, because I think hand-holding has a bit of a negative connotation, but really it's just more, I guess, constant calibration and course correction.
Thank you, Megan. This was super useful. Actually, I completely agree. In my experience, usually two problems were doing the relationship with the agency. Either they had no bandwidth at all, and they were considering the agency as full outsourcing. We are not going to do anything, explain you anything. Or the other problem very often was they thought they knew everything. They just needed someone to execute. And they would give us no space to give them recommendation to do our thing. So totally agree. We are over time. Just one super quick question for you. Number one question to ask an agency when you are selecting one. How do you understand which one is the one?
Oh boy, that is hard to narrow down. But I think for me, I will say their experience in working with SaaS businesses, particularly, and understanding that they're long life cycles, they need a really specific type of education, nurture, all of that. That was a pretty important one.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Megan, and see you soon. Bye.
Thanks, Massimo.